My son said I'd make 15% a year, guaranteed. He called me his angel investor. When the checks stopped coming, I learned I was never really an investor at all. I was just his easiest target. But that night, when it all started, all I heard in his voice was warmth and excitement. I am 58 years old, and that evening I came home from my job at a medical office with aching feet and a stiff back. I kicked off my shoes, slid a frozen dinner into the microwave, and sat at the kitchen table with my mail spread out in front of me. Bills, statements, and a retirement brochure I didn't really want to read. I remember feeling small and tired, like the world had already decided what I could and couldn't have. My phone lit up with his name, Evan, and my whole body lifted. No matter how old he gets, when my son calls, I feel 16 again, like someone picked me out of a crowd and chose me. "Hey, Mom," he said, bright and confident. The way he hit that word, Mom, warmed my chest. For a moment I felt seen, and I realized how much I missed that feeling. He asked about my day, my knees, the doctor who always runs late. The small talk felt like a gift because he's usually so busy. Then his tone shifted just slightly into that smooth voice he uses when he wants something. "So listen," he said, "I've got something big to show you. Our chance, Mom, a family startup." The phrase "our chance" made my heart jump, and then it pricked. No one had said "our" to me in a long time, and it stung more than I wanted to admit. He came over an hour later with his laptop and a fancy binder. He set them on my old kitchen table like they were crown jewels. "I made a presentation," he said, almost proud, almost smug, "for my angel investor." When he called me that, angel investor, I laughed, but it hurt in a strange way. I'm not glamorous. I'm not powerful. I'm a woman who clips coupons and worries about prescription costs. I didn't feel like I deserved that title, and hearing him say it made me feel both special and a little foolish, like I was playing dress-up in someone else's clothes. He opened the slideshow. Sleek graphs, photos of warehouses, a glossy logo with my last name stamped in bold letters. "This is a family business," he said. "You and me." Those words put a lump in my throat. I thought about all the times I sat alone at his ball games while his father worked late, all the nights I stayed up sewing patches on his uniform. Hearing him finally say "you and me" felt like a late apology and a reward rolled into one. And still, a small part of me hurt because it took a business idea to make him say it. He tapped a chart. "We're talking 15% a year, easy," he said. "Low risk, Mom. Way better than anything your boring 401k is doing." He chuckled when he called my retirement plan boring, and I smiled along, but it stung. That account is the reason I get up at 6 every morning and stand all day. It's the only thing that keeps the future from feeling scary. The way he dismissed it made me feel out of touch, like a child clutching a piggy bank while the adults talk about real money. He leaned in. "You trust me, right?" he asked. My stomach tightened. "Trust me." It sounded less like a question and more like a test. If I hesitated, I'd be the mother who didn't believe in her own son. The idea hurt before I even answered. "Of course I do," I said too quickly, because the alternative felt like betrayal, and I couldn't stand the thought of hurting him. He explained that if I moved most of my 401k and IRA into his company, I could finally relax. The way he said finally made me think of all the times I'd admitted I was tired, that I was counting down the years until retirement. I suddenly felt exposed, like he'd been listening and collecting my complaints as material. It hurt to realize my weariness had become part of his pitch. I asked quietly, "Do we need to sign anything?" His smile froze for half a second. "Mom," he said, with a gentle scold in his voice, "we're family. We don't need contracts between us. Papers are for strangers." The word strangers landed like a slap. I never wanted to be a stranger to my own son, so my cheeks burned with shame for even asking. I felt guilty for wanting protection, as if wanting something in writing meant I loved him less. He pulled his chair closer and walked me through the steps on the screen for rolling over my account. "You're going to be so proud of yourself," he said. "This is brave, Mom. Brave." The compliment should have felt good, but instead it pinched. It made me feel like I was about to walk off a cliff and call it courage. I pushed that feeling down because his eyes were shining and I didn't want to dull that light. In the end, I typed in my passwords with shaking fingers while he watched. Every click felt like tearing off a small piece of myself and handing it to him. When the final confirmation screen appeared, he gave a quick laugh and a light hug, already glancing at his phone. The hug was thin and distracted, and it hurt more than I expected. I had just handed over my safety, and I felt like an errand he'd checked off a list. After he left, the house felt too quiet. The binder with the glossy logo sat on my table looking important. I stared at it and tried to feel only pride, tried to believe every word he'd said. Underneath the pride was a faint, sharp ache, the kind you get when a shoe is just a little too tight. I told myself it was nothing, that this was what trust felt like. I didn't know yet that the ache was the first sign of something breaking. The first signs that something was wrong were small, and that almost hurt the most. A late payment here, a vague answer there. Nothing big enough to call a lie, just soft little gaps I kept stepping over because I couldn't stand the idea of doubting my own son. Every time I swallowed that doubt, it felt like swallowing a tiny stone. At first, he sent a couple of small transfers and called them early returns. When the first one hit my account, I stared at the number like it was a promise in writing. He texted, "See, Mom? I told you this was solid." The word solid made me breathe easier and irritated me at the same time. It sounded like he was patting me on the head, like I'd been silly to worry. I felt grateful and embarrassed in the same breath. Then the updates started to slide. 1 month, he forgot to send anything. When I called, he answered on speakerphone, music and voices loud in the background. "Sorry, Mom, I'm at a networking event," he said. "Startups take time. We're in growth mode, so I have to reinvest." "Startups take time, Mom." The way he said it landed like a lecture. I heard Mom not as love, but as a way to put me in the slow lane, like I was too old to understand. It stung that he could use the name that used to feel like a hug and turn it into a warning label. I started noticing his social media posts. A new car with a caption about finally leveling up, beach photos with friends, drinks in their hands, the sunset behind them, a fancy apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows. Each picture felt like a small slap. I remembered moving my retirement money after work, sitting under the yellow kitchen light with my glasses sliding down my nose. Seeing him live large with that same money made my chest tighten. When I asked about the car, he laughed. "Relax, Mom. You have to look successful to attract investors." The word relax burned. It made my worry sound like the problem, not his spending. I tried to stay calm and ask practical questions. "Can you send me a statement from the company?" I asked one evening. He sighed, just a little. "Mom, I'm slammed. I'll send you something later." Don't get stuck in the old way of thinking. This is modern business. Old way of thinking. That phrase cut deeper than it should have. It made my years of working and saving sound like a joke, like he was rolling his eyes at the life that kept food on his plate when he was little. When another month passed without a payment, worry turned heavier. I lay awake thinking about rent and medical bills, replaying his phrases like hooks. "We're family. You trust me, right?" The same words that had once felt like closeness now felt like pressure. One Saturday, I logged in to check the retirement account again. My heart thumped as the page loaded. The balance was so much lower than it used to be. Then I saw the transaction history. A transfer not to Swift Innovations LLC, the name of his company, but to an account with his personal name on it. Seeing his full name beside the word distribution made my body go cold. It felt like the screen was finally speaking plain English. This was never about our future. It was about his. I sat very still. No tears, no shouting, just a hard, quiet hurt spreading through my chest. I thought of the double shifts so he could have new shoes, repainting his bedroom blue when he came home from college, sewing curtains with little stars because he said he needed a space to think, co-signing his first car loan because he didn't have the credit. Each memory now felt used, like every act of love had become a line item he could draw from whenever he wanted. When I called him about the transfer, he answered with that same cool tone. "Mom, it's all the same," he said. "I am the company. The money has to move through my account. Don't worry about the details. I am the company." There was no "we" in that sentence at all. It told me exactly where I stood, outside, and "don't worry about the details" sounded like an order to stay out of my own future. My face went hot with anger and shame at the same time. I didn't yell. I just said, I thought this was a family business. There was a pause. Then he replied, "It is. You're my angel investor, remember? You believed in me when no one else did." Those words twisted the knife. Angel investor now meant the person I can take from without paperwork. Believed in me now meant you made yourself easy to use. My resentment grew heavier than my fear. After we hung up, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the old binder with the glossy logo. The house was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator hum. I didn't make a plan yet. I didn't call anyone. I just let myself feel it fully. The disrespect, the sweet words wrapped around a lie, the years of sacrifice he treated like a personal bank. It was a deep, steady pain, and for the first time, I didn't rush to excuse it or soften it. I just sat with it until the anger inside me stopped being wild and became something else, clear, quiet, and ready. A few days after I saw his name on that transfer, I woke up with a steady, cold focus I hadn't felt in years. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, and opened my accounts again. This time, I didn't look away. I went line by line, reading every transaction like it was a sentence in the story of my life. Each time I saw his name, or his company name, my chest tightened. Every dollar that had moved out felt like a small piece of my future he'd quietly carried off. I searched my email for anything tied to his startup. Old messages popped up, full of bright promises. 15% a year. Easy. Low risk, mom. This is basically a gift. Reading them now, resentment rolled through me in a slow, heavy wave. Gift made me the angriest. He'd called it a gift to me, when the truth was, I had been the gift. My savings, my trust, my fear of running out of time. At work, I finally said something to Denise in billing. She's the kind of woman who notices everything but never pushes. I told her my son had talked me into moving my retirement into a family startup, and I watched her face. She didn't roll her eyes. She just tightened her mouth the tiniest bit. That tiny change hurt, because it told me I'd walked into something obvious to everyone but me. "Do you have anything in writing?" she asked gently. I shook my head. My throat stung. He said we didn't need it because we're family. Saying it out loud made it sound worse. Denise didn't say, that was a mistake, but it was there in her eyes. My resentment swelled, not toward her, but toward him for putting me in a position where a reasonable question made me feel foolish. Denise handed me the number of a financial advisor she trusted. "Just talk to her," she said. "You deserve to understand what happened." The word deserve caught me off guard. For years I'd acted like I was lucky to get anything at all. Hearing that I deserved clarity lit something stubborn inside me. I made the appointment and gathered everything: statements, printed emails, screenshots of his presentation. In the advisor's office, my hands shook, not because of her, but because of what she might confirm. She flipped through my papers in silence. Every time she paused on one of his cheerful lines, "We're going to make you rich, Mom. You can finally relax." My resentment sharpened. Those words didn't feel like love anymore. They felt like tools. "This was high risk," she said at last, tapping the page, "and he never should have used the word guaranteed with you. No one can promise a set return like that, at least not honestly." My face burned. I remembered the way he'd looked me straight in the eye and said guaranteed like he was offering comfort. Now it sounded like a trick he chose because he knew I was tired and scared. She explained that high risk often means you can lose most or all of what you put in, especially if the business is new or barely structured. And there should always be a written agreement, she added. Even with family, maybe especially with family. Especially with family. That hit me hard. I remembered him laughing when I asked about paperwork. Papers are for strangers. He'd made me feel guilty for wanting the very thing that could have protected me. Right there in that office, another memory cracked open. My mother at her kitchen table years ago signing a loan for my brother because he'd said, "We're family, Mom. You've got my back, right?" He never paid her back. She cried in her room where no one could see. I'd promised myself I wouldn't repeat that pattern. Yet here I was, with the same kind of hurt sitting in my lap. The unfairness of it stole my breath for a second. The advisor kept talking, explaining plainly how legitimate investments are supposed to be structured, how regulators exist to watch over people who sell investments, how real firms provide registration details you can verify. If someone can't show you proper licensing or documentation, she said, that's a serious warning sign. I pulled up my son's website on my phone right there. No registration numbers, no disclosures, just glossy promises and photos. Then I opened his social media and scrolled until my eyes snagged on a comment thread. Buried in it was a line he'd written to a friend. Got my seed money from the easiest investor ever. Family money is the softest money. For a second, my vision blurred. Softest money. That was how he saw me. Not as a person, not as his mother who worked herself tired. Just soft money. Something shifted right then. I stopped asking, how could he do this? And started asking, what am I going to do now? The hurt didn't vanish, but it hardened into a clear line inside me. I was done explaining him away. Done telling myself love meant letting him treat me like this. The advisor looked at me and asked quietly, if he weren't your son, what would you call this? I knew the answer, even if my mouth wasn't ready to say it. I could have called him and let the anger spill out. Instead, I chose silence for now, not weakness, strategy. I wasn't going to waste one more tear trying to convince him to respect me. I was going to learn everything I needed to know, and then I was going to act. When I walked out of that office, the air felt different. The world hadn't changed, but I had. For the first time, I wasn't just a mother who'd been misled. I was a woman gathering facts, step by step, building a clean picture of what had really happened. And with each detail I uncovered, my resentment stopped being fog and became something else. Sharp, steady strength. By the time the weekend rolled around, I'd stopped shaking. The fear was still there, but it sat under something stronger now. A steady decision. I pulled my old file box from the closet, set it on the kitchen table, and started sorting. Bank statements, printed emails, screenshots of his messages promising guaranteed returns, and calling me his angel investor. Each page I slid into a neat stack felt like I was finishing a puzzle he never expected me to complete. And every time I saw "don't worry" Mom in writing, my resentment sharpened. Those words used to sound like comfort. Now they sounded like, stay quiet while I take what I want. I made another appointment. This time, not just with the financial advisor, but with an estate attorney too. Walking into that law office, I felt strangely calm. The attorney asked me to tell the whole story, and I did step by step, leaving nothing out. When I repeated my son's line, "Papers are for strangers," I heard my own voice harden. That sentence had once made me feel guilty for wanting protection. Now it made me angry enough to sit up straighter. The attorney nodded slowly and said, "You have more power here than you think." Hearing the word power connected to me felt unfamiliar. For years, my role had been to give, not to hold the line. We went through my will. In the old version, I'd name my son as the person who would step in if I ever couldn't manage my affairs. Back then, it felt natural. It felt like trust. Now, seeing his name tied to that responsibility made my stomach tighten. The thought of the same person who moved my retirement money into his personal account, someday signing decisions in my name, made my skin crawl. I told the attorney to remove him and appoint a neutral professional instead, saying it felt like cutting a cord. It hurt, but the relief was immediate, almost physical. As we made changes, I kept seeing his face from that night at my kitchen table. Charm, confidence, that warm grin. "We're in this together, Mom," he'd said. I used to hear inclusion in that line. Now it sounded like a cover story. We were never together. He was driving, and I was the gas tank. That thought added a fresh layer of resentment to every memory of him rolling his eyes when I asked simple questions. Next, I called my bank and asked for their fraud and security department. I didn't raise my voice. I just explained I wanted certain transactions reviewed and all third-party access blocked. When they asked whether anyone else had authorization, I remembered him saying, "Mom, just give me online access for a bit. It'll make everything easier." I remembered the little joke afterward. "You know I'd never do anything shady, right?" Back then, I laughed at the word shady. Now it echoed as I told the bank, no one else should be able to move my funds. No one. Saying it that plainly made me feel taller, like I'd finally stepped into my own corner. Quietly, I documented everything. I printed the messages where he promised low risk and high reward. I saved screenshots of his posts, new lifestyle, big talk, bragging about seed money. Every time I saw a line like family money is the easiest money, my jaw tightened. He wrote it like a joke. To me, it read like a confession. I filed each page by date with notes in the margins. The folder grew thicker, and so did my resolve. The advisor showed me how to file a complaint with our state securities regulator and send a tip to the SEC. Filling out those forms wasn't dramatic. It was slow and careful. I described what he told me, what he promised, how he used words like guaranteed and safe while funneling money into his own account. Every time I typed a sentence that started with "he said," my resentment flared, then settled into focus. I attached copies of his slide deck, his emails, the transfers. I wasn't doing this to hurt him out of spite. I was doing it because he'd treated my life savings like his allowance. When I hit submit, there was no rush of joy, just a calm, clean feeling like closing a door and turning the lock. For once, I wasn't making excuses for him. I was trusting myself instead. It didn't take long for him to notice the shift. He called one afternoon, agitated. "Mom, my card just got declined for a big purchase. Did you mess with the accounts?" The way he said "mess with" made my resentment spike. Like I was the problem, like he had a natural right to my money. I kept my voice even. "I secured my accounts," I said. "That's all." There was a long pause, and then he snapped, "You're overreacting. You're destroying everything I'm building." That word, destroying, landed hard. He had no problem draining my retirement, but the minute the flow stopped, I was destroying his world. Then the calls started from relatives and siblings. "Your son is stressed," one of them said. "Couldn't you give him some breathing room? You know how hard it is for young people right now." Each comment twisted the knife. No one called me when I was staring at my statements late at night, trying to figure out how I'd retire. But now that I'd taken control, I was the problem. One person even said, "You're disturbing the peace in the family." That phrase stung because I knew what it really meant. Go back to being quiet. Go back to paying. I listened without arguing. I didn't mention the complaints I'd filed or the documents I'd saved. I just said, "My finances are my responsibility," and left it there. Inside, their discomfort only confirmed what I already knew. They liked the version of me who gave and didn't ask questions. They didn't know what to do with the version of me who set limits. And in that stillness, I found something I hadn't expected: satisfaction. While they rushed around trying to pull me back into my old role, I stayed steady. I'd changed my will. I'd locked down access. I'd reported what needed to be reported. They didn't see the full picture yet, and I didn't feel the need to show it. For the first time, I understood something simple. I didn't owe anyone an explanation for protecting myself. My silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was a choice. The letter from the regulator arrived on a plain Tuesday. No big stamp, no dramatic warning on the envelope. Just my name and address in a simple window. My hands trembled as I opened it, but my mind felt oddly calm. Inside, it said they had reviewed my complaint and opened a formal case. They had contacted my son. They were requesting a response, and the letter laid out the consequences if he didn't make things right. Seeing it in black and white tightened my chest. Someone had finally said, in official language, what I'd been afraid to admit. What he did was wrong. A few days later, my phone lit up with his name. I answered, and before I could say hello, he snapped, "What did you do?" The way he emphasized "you" made my resentment surge. He'd moved my retirement into his personal account, and now he sounded like I'd attacked him. "I told the truth," I said quietly. They looked at the records. He let out a short, angry laugh. "You don't understand how business works," he said. That line hit the same sore spot as before. Me as the confused child, him as the expert. But this time, the sting turned into something steady. I remembered the advisor, the attorney, the documents. I understood enough. He kept going. "They're saying I have to pay everything back or it could escalate. Do you realize what you've done to me? What you've done to me." For a second, the old guilt tried to rise. Then I pictured my account balance after the transfer, the hollow, dropped feeling in my chest. I thought about the nights I lay awake wondering if I'd ever get to retire. My resentment answered for me. What I did was protect myself, I said. You chose what you did with my money. Soon after, his older sister called. Mom, he's freaking out, she said. He says you went to the government on him. Couldn't you have handled this in the family? That phrase, handled this in the family, made my jaw clench. I'd tried. I asked for statements. I asked for clarity. He brushed me off. No one rushed to call me then. My resentment wasn't only for him anymore, it was for the way people cared only once there were consequences. I listened, then said, I gave him a chance to be honest. This is where we are now. A few weeks later, another official notice arrived, a resolution. To avoid harsher action, my son agreed to return the funds on a set schedule, with formal paperwork and oversight. I sat at my kitchen table with the settlement in front of me, reading glasses low on my nose. Seeing his signature next to a promise to repay felt bitter and sad. This was the same hand that had written, "We're in this together, Mom." Now he was signing because he had to, not because he wanted to. My resentment flared, but underneath it was something quieter. Not revenge, just balance. He came over once to sign documents in my presence. He stood in my kitchen, looking around like the room had changed. I can't believe you did this, he muttered, flipping through the pages. That sentence cut deep, but not the way he meant it. I thought, I can't believe I waited this long. When he said, "You've ruined my reputation," it stung because he still didn't mention what he'd done to my life. I kept my voice even. "You did that when you used my retirement like your personal wallet," I said. His face hardened and he looked away. For the first time, the silence between us felt cleaner than forced apologies. After the settlement, I went back to the advisor and opened a new account under her guidance. Licensed, regulated, clear. We went step by step. No grand promises, no guaranteed anything. Just plain talk about risk, time, and protection. It felt almost boring, and that boredom was a relief. When she asked who I wanted listed to help manage my finances if I ever couldn't, I took a breath and said, "No children. Use a professional trustee." The words tightened my throat. It sounded harsh, but it felt honest. I'd spent my whole life assuming family would be my safety net. Now I understood. I had to be my own first. My attorney updated my will to match. When I read the line stating none of my children would ever control my money, there was a dull ache in my chest, grief for what I'd hoped my family would be. But there was also warmth, like I'd finally wrapped a blanket around the part of me that had always stood in the cold, waiting for permission to matter. My resentment hadn't disappeared. It had changed shape. It wasn't a wound anymore. It was a reminder of where I would never go back. In the middle of it all, I got an email from a woman I barely knew, someone from the clinic who'd heard a bit through Denise. She wrote, "Seeing you stand up for yourself gave me the courage to say no when my brother tried to pressure me into signing over my savings. You reminded me my name is on my account for a reason." I cried at that. Real tears, the kind that released something. Someone who owed me nothing saw value in what I'd done. My son still sends messages sometimes. "We could have fixed this if you hadn't overreacted. You made it harder than it had to be." Each line still carries a sting, a small pulse of resentment, because he keeps trying to place the blame on me instead of facing what he did. But now, when my phone lights up, I don't rush to respond. I look at the screen, breathe, and set it down. My refusal to argue has become its own answer. One evening, after checking my new account and filing the last signed papers, I sat in my quiet living room. No one was asking for anything. No one was telling me I was destroying the peace. The house felt quiet, but I didn't feel empty. I felt steady. I made a cup of tea, looked at the stack of documents that now protected me, and let a calm warmth spread through my chest. I was still a mother. I still cared, but I was no longer anyone's easiest target. And if you're listening to this and hearing your own story between my words, let it be your sign. You don't have to earn love by giving away your safety. You're allowed to protect what you built. And if they call that betrayal, remember, sometimes saying no to them is the first honest yes you ever give to yourself.